If you're a Def Leppard fan, especially if you love the early Def Leppard stuff, you are going to love this video that I have for you today. Those people that know me or that follow this channel know how much I love getting into kind of the old newspapers and classic things, especially related to classic rock. And I'm a big Def Leppard fan up to a point. I have to admit, and this blows people away, I just didn't really like the album Hysteria. That album was, of course, the biggest selling album they ever did by a long shot. I mean, nothing that they ever did before or since even came close to that one. And I really, really wanted to like that album. And because I was a big Def Leppard fan, Pyromania was one of my favorite albums ever. And we waited around so long for Hysteria to come out. And I saw them on that tour. That's the one they did in the round. I don't think they were ever a great live band. They were okay. I've seen them in concert many times. And the first time I saw them was on the Pyromania tour. They were, believe it or not, they were opening up for Billy Squier. We forget how popular Billy Squier was at a time. And I loved Billy Squier too. I was a huge Billy Squier fan. But Def Leppard was opening up for them on the Pyromania tour. And I found this old article. This was written actually before that. This was off after High and Dry. And I thought you'd get a kick out of this, especially if you like Def Leppard, and especially if you like the early days, to hear what was being said about Def Leppard in this article going back to 1981. This article is from October 6, 1981, The Morning Call. And it's called Def Leppard Defends Its Deafening Sound. And you'll see this picture here at the top. This is pre-car accident. This is pre-Phil Collen on guitar. Hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. Anyway, this is, you see that picture of these guys right here. The one on the right that left the band, Pete Willis, he was, I don't know, I wonder sometimes when you look back at the early days of Def Leppard, if he wasn't the guy that really drove that early kind of AC/DC sound that they had, because this album, High and Dry, really did have that more straight ahead rock and roll kind of AC/DC sound. They still had a little bit of that when Pyromania came out, and it was a great album. High and Dry, in my opinion, was the best album they ever did. But anyway, that's Pete Willis over on the right. And I think he played a Gibson Explorer, if I'm not mistaken. He was just a little guy and had a little bit of an Angus Young kind of attitude to him. But you see here, there's Steve Clark on the left, Steeman Clark, Rick Allen, who's the drummer. He's the one that lost his left arm in the car wreck. This would have been several years after this. And there's Joe Elliott, Rick Savage, who's the bass player there, second from the right, and then Pete Willis. And Rick Savage, when you listen to especially the stuff from Pyromania on, and you hear that, there's this very distinct background vocal. And that's him. I'm pretty sure all that really distinct background vocal sound that you'd get came from him. He's the bass player. Anyway, this was the kind of the early classic Def Leppard lineup, and I loved this stuff. And again, that High and Dry album, On Through the Night, that had the song Rock Brigade. I don't know that I ever have listened to that album all the way through. I like the song Rock Brigade, but I don't know, the rest of the album just didn't do much. But they did this next album, and it just was huge. So anyway, I think you'll get it. You'll find this interesting. Def Leppard defends its deafening sound. Okay, we're going to share this with you. And despite a successful debut album that gained them a reputation as one of the best new heavy metal bands of the past year, the 5 English whiz kids who make up Def Leppard have taken their share of knocks. At first, we were accepted with open arms, vocalist Joe Elliott said in a recent telephone interview, stifling yawns prompted by an early morning flight into Pittsburgh, where his band was to gig that night with Southern rockers Blackfoot. That's such an interesting idea, thinking about that. Def Leppard, I guess we're opening up for Blackfoot. Blackfoot, I have a couple of their albums. the one song that kind of almost became a hit was, I think it was called Teenage Idol. And wasn't it Blackfoot that did Highway Song? I can't remember. Anyway, the guy that used to sing for Blackfoot then started playing guitar for Lynyrd Skynyrd some time ago when they re-put it back together. But then we were accused of selling out to America, said Elliott, who at 22 is Def Leppard's oldest member. That's so fascinating. And in England, selling out to America is one of the biggest crimes. If popularity was indeed a crime, then there's enough evidence to lock up the Leps for life. The band distributed a self-made EP a couple of years ago, which sold out in 2 weeks and became a collector's item. Last year, decibel-hungry fans in Kansas City stormed the stage twice during the band's opening set for Ted Nugent. And their debut LP, On Through the Night, reached number 51 on Billboard's Top 200, while albums by other highly touted British heavy metal youngsters like Saxon, Iron Maiden, and the Tigers of Pantang barely made a dent. Yeah, so in 1979, I think, is when On Through the Night was put out. I mean, you have Killers by Iron Maiden would have been right around that time. Saxon, I don't know what they were putting out back then. And then I don't know, I really know nothing about the Tigers of Pantang. But anyway, Def Leppard, they were definitely on the rise at that point. This year, the Leps, who include Pete Willis and Steve Clark on guitar, Rick Savage on bass, and Rick Allen drums, have picked up from where they left off. Their second LP, High and Dry, on Mercury Polygram Records, to be showcased tonight at Lehigh University's Stabler Arena, is number 39 after 9 weeks on Billboard's chart. So why have the Leps received brickbats from both the British music press and from fellow Sheffield area residents who like to shout obscenities at them from across the street? The press is too powerful in England, where publications are main information. That was a quote, by the way, and I guess this is continuing with Joe Elliott. The press is too powerful in England, unquote, where publications are the main information source because radio limits the amount of rock and roll it plays, he said. Quote, the press almost destroys a band, building them up at first, then shooting them down. It seems the writers are more concerned about keeping their own names in the public eye. Furthermore, Elliott said, the press influences the audiences. The kids in America come to the gigs to have a good time. In England, when they see a band for the first time, they sit with their arms folded and analyze. They pick this up from the press. The acid-tipped pens of journalists aside, there's another reason Def Leppard has shouldered criticism. Quote, we wrote songs that appeal to American audiences. Saxon's sound seems to be mostly riffs with vocals low in the production mix. It appeals to the British, but our sound is more melodic, with lots of chords, the vocals up front, and guitars in the back. Okay, that's an interesting way to look at it. But they really were, especially in the album High and Dry. I mean, that is just a riff-heavy album. I mean, the song Let It Go. I mean, that whole thing's built on the riff. High and Dry. It was one of the early songs I learned on the guitar. Just riff-heavy, that whole album. Most of that album just was filled with just great guitar riffs. So let's see here. So where was I? I'm singing American audiences. There we go. But our sound is more melodic. Enter Robert John Mutt Lange. We wanted him to produce our first LP, but other commitments tied him up. So when he agreed to do our second one, we knew it would be better than the first. The production on that one was much too smooth, which is true. And when you get into High and Dry, you feel that raw energy come out. And that is, like I said earlier, it's a little more of that AC/DC crunchy, straight ahead rock and roll sound that they captured in High and Dry. Lang, who has produced AC/DC among other bands, gave High and Dry a sound that's harder with less pop than the debut. Predictably, the album has gone a long way in dousing some of the criticism aimed at the band. It's 200 times better, said Elliott. The songwriting has improved. I'm singing better. And the overall performances have improved. And Joe Elliott, by the way, has a great singing voice. As a singer myself, I used to do it. I did it professionally for a while. I tried singing some Leppard stuff over the years, and it's not easy. he's got I think he's maybe underappreciated for how amazing his voice really is. Elliott holds no modesty when asked about the best new heavy metal band. Without a doubt, Def Leppard. That's a quote from Joe Elliott. And holds little regard for their competition. I don't like them at all, in fact. I don't listen to them because I only find fault. Me and Saxon drummer Pete Gill are good chums, but when we get together, we never talk shop. Mott the Hoople, Jethro Tull, and UFO are some of the bands Elliott listened to while in high school, at a time when drawing concert posters and writing fictitious reviews dominated over homework. Quote, I knew I'd never become a brain surgeon, he said of his do-nothing attitude towards education, so I decided to go into rock and roll. And that's the end of the article. Anyway, it's interesting looking at what was being said in these articles in the early days. And again, this is pre-Pyromania. This is not long after High and Dry came out. Which, as I said, if you've never listened, if you like Def Leppard, but you've never listened to High and Dry, you've missed out on the real, in my opinion, the real raw Def Leppard. There's a few tunes that they'll still play, like Bring It On the Heartache. Yeah, that was on this album, on High and Dry. I guess I'm getting that mixed up, but that song, I think they still play that one live. And boy, I hope I'm not getting that one wrong now that I say that. But they still play a couple of songs from High and Dry when they play live. And Let It Go is just such a classic, amazing rock anthem. That some of that stuff they did, that whole album, High and Dry from start to finish, just like Pyromania. Pyromania, too, was just an amazing album, start to finish, just spectacular. But of course, Pete Willis, who was on High and Dry, who's in the picture that I showed you a second ago, Pete Willis over on the right, they kicked him out of the band not long probably after this article came out. And then they found this new guitar whiz, Phil Collen, who then is the one that he's still in the band today. He's usually has his shirt off, really short hair, and he was kind of a guitar whiz kid that they brought in and then played. I don't know how much he actually played on Pyromania. I don't really remember, but he was involved with that album to some extent. And then he became really, really heavily involved once they started moving on and they put out the one that I was talking about earlier that I don't really care for so much. And then, of course, it wasn't long after that album came out that, I mean, they had so many tragedies. Pete Willis is gone. And then, of course, Steve Clark, who's over here on the left, he died. And then it just hasn't been, I can't remember, Dio's old guitarist. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. But he's the one that plays in Def Leppard now. I'll feel so stupid when this video's over and I didn't say his name, and I'll be back in my office going, oh my gosh. Anyway, because he was a kind of a guitar whiz kid that Dio brought to the forefront a long, long time ago. And so, anyway, it's not super important, but the band has gone through so much. Of course, Rick Allen losing his arm and what have you, all that other stuff. So, and then Hysteria, which I like I said, I didn't care much for that album. But this early stuff, High and Dry, it's amazing. Anyway, be sure and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and with that, have yourself a fantastic day.